Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ted Ritter with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, better known, of course, as the NJTPA. I want to thank you for joining us. This is the third in our series of 3 Let's Talk Transportation sessions. It's all part of a public outreach we're doing for the NJTPA's next long-range transportation plan. Today, we're going to be talking and listening on that all-important balance between people, parking, and deliveries in our busy downtowns. Before we get down to business today, we're going to quickly hear from the NJTPA's Executive Director, David Barron. Dave?
Thank you, Ted. Everybody can hear me, right?
We can.
Right. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Ted mentioned, today's discussion is really an important part of our outreach for our long-range transportation plan update. And that plan will set a vision for the future of transportation in our region over the next 25 years. And by the way, it's a requirement to have that plan in place to keep federal surface transportation funds flowing to our region as well. We're calling this plan Connecting Communities because we really want to recognize the key role transportation plays in connecting everyone to the places they need to go and the people they want to see. And that can mean commuting to work or school, visiting relatives, enjoying dining and shopping in one of the many downtowns in our region, accessing healthcare, taking advantage of the rich arts, recreation, and entertainment our region has to offer. And quality transportation is what makes access to all these things possible. And so we need to hear from you, the people who live and work in our region, to help us ensure that our plan reflects your needs. So Connected Communities is going to cover a variety of topics, including the one we're here to discuss today, creating vibrant downtowns and balancing the many competing needs of deliveries, parking, and people and circulation, and with particular attention to those who are walking and biking in our downtowns. You're going to hear more about some of the work that the NJTPA funds that's relevant to this shortly, but I do want to quickly highlight 2 of our programs that are open to municipalities. And these programs really speak directly to today's topic because, as I think we all know, municipal land use is really at the heart of making downtowns work effectively. So first, I want to mention our Vibrant Places program, which provides free technical assistance for placemaking projects that integrate arts, culture, and other community assets to strengthen the local economy. We issue solicitations for that program annually each summer. And the other one I want to mention is Planning for Emerging Centers, which will have a solicitation out next month. This program provides technical assistance to support municipal efforts that create more sustainable, transit-supportive, and walkable communities. And you can find information about these programs and others relevant to municipalities at njtpa.org/municipalities. So once again, thanks for joining us today. I look forward to hearing your ideas and suggestions and comments, and the feedback we gather at these Let's Talk events, as well as through our online survey and at in-person pop-up events that we're going to be doing around the region over the next few months. All of that's going to be incorporated into our plan. We'll share a draft of the plan this summer to get some additional feedback, and then we're going to bring it before our board in September for adoption. And so that's sort of the outlook over the next few months. We can't do it without you, so we really do appreciate y'all being here. And with that, I will turn things back over to Ted. So thanks very much and enjoy the program.
Dave, thanks very much for that tee up. Appreciate it. Note that Melissa has posted in the chat the link to the NJTPA's municipalities webpage, which Dave referenced. Some great resources there. Encourage you to check it out. But first, before we get into our program today, a special thanks goes to Downtown New Jersey. Our co-sponsor. Yeah, it's an NJTPA program today, but we could not have done this without Downtown New Jersey. Not only a perfect co-sponsor for this event, given the subject matter, but also a longtime partner. I just want to quickly welcome Natalie from Downtown New Jersey. Natalie?
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Natalie from Downtown New Jersey. We are the statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the vitality of our downtowns through advocacy education, and resource sharing. We represent a diverse network of downtown professionals, municipal leaders, and service providers working together to create vibrant commercial districts across the state. So I want to thank all of our members who've joined us today, everybody who's in our network, who's on today to contribute to this incredible conversation. I think, one of the things that we all struggle with as downtown managers and professionals, right, is the most complicated piece of real estate in our downtowns, which is that curb space. And so I want to thank NJTPA for inviting us to join in on this really important conversation. And we are really excited to hear from all of you, not just because of the impact that it'll have on the long range plan, but also for us at Downtown New Jersey to help us be able to provide additional education and resources that might be able to help y'all along your journey. So I invite you to engage today, but also be sure to follow Downtown New Jersey. We're online at downtownnj.com. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And stay tuned for information on our upcoming April workshop surrounding restaurant trends and some of the more important advocacy issues that we'll be pursuing this year. So thank you again to NJTPA, and we'll turn it back over to you, Ted.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's it's a tricky topic. A friend of mine owns a restaurant with his brother in the downtown near where I live, and I was there a few weeks ago. I was trying to think about how to frame these the welcoming remarks for today, and I was in the place around happy hour time, so we're like between 5 and 6 on a weeknight. And deliveries were coming in through the front door, and it was kind of disrupting the whole sort of vibe of the place. And I was talking to him, and I said, "Why the deliveries now?" And he goes, "Well, because of the way the street's being used since the pandemic, we have to queue our deliveries in the bank, but we have to wait for the bank to close at 5. So the bank's letting us use this as a staging area to bring this stuff in." And I was thinking, wow, all these logistics. It's a localized and kind of unique experience to our town, but I bet that similar dynamic takes place in a lot of different places in the NJTPA region, and it sort of highlights what we're here to talk about today. So what we're going to do, we've got our welcoming remarks kind of underway here, and then we're going to hear very shortly from our two subject matter experts. Yes, I'm going to introduce them shortly, so don't worry. And then we'll move toward the end into breakout rooms for facilitated discussions. So real quick, let's orient ourselves to the NJTPA region. Over on the right there, that's the region. It's 13 counties, 2 major cities, northern and central New Jersey, shown on the slide here. The NJTPA board consists of an elected official, right, from each of these 13 counties and 2 cities. We call them subregions, plus reps from our partner agencies. So Governor's Office, NJDOT, NJ Transit, Port Authority, and an at-large citizens representative. And the board collectively will be asked to consider and ultimately adopt Connecting Communities, our next long-range plan, as Dave mentioned, in September. All right, so next slide. So the long-range transportation plan, yeah, a lot's at stake. Our federal funding, we have to have this plan federally mandated every 4 years, updated in order for us to continue to receive the all-important federal transportation funding that comes into the region. A lot at stake, certainly. This slide here emphasizes some of the key points, but here's what I want you to think about today when you're thinking about this topic, about downtowns and parking and deliveries and people and how to balance it. Think of the NJTPA's long-range transportation plan as a kind of roadmap, a strategic vision for the transportation future in our region. That's sort of the best way to think about it if you had to sum it up in just a few words. But next slide, we need your help to get there. We can't have a very effective vision for our transportation future if we don't have inclusive, diverse, meaningful public input. And that's part of what we're doing here today. We would love you to take our short survey. It's live for another couple of weeks. You see here our Connecting Communities survey. We've closing in on somewhere in the range of 1,700 responses so far. We'll take as many folks to complete this survey as possible. It takes just a few minutes. It's designed for people like me with a short attention span. So I guarantee you can get in and out of there and give us that important input we need. Also, after you take the survey, share it widely with your friends, your families, your contacts, your social networks. Anybody in North and Central Jersey would like to hear from you. And we've even got a custom tailored option for kids and teens. You see here Sammy the squirrel on the right. He's our NJTPA on-air mascot. You see the link there for the on-air multimedia contest to hear from kids and teens. After all, they are the future of the NJTPA region. All right, so next slide. Kind of enough out of me. I've been yapping now for a couple of minutes. Let's meet our partners who are going to get us talking about the balance, the all-important balance between people, parking, and deliveries in our downtowns. Alison Conaway is from the City College of New York. She'll be speaking first. And a longtime NJTPA friend, Mike Manzella from the city of Jersey City, will speak second. Certainly one of our busiest downtowns in the NJTPA region. And he's going to be talking about the Jersey City perspective. Alison, meantime, will be talking about managing curbside commercial activity. So we have two great speakers and we want to hear from them before we get into our breakouts. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for letting me ramble on. Alison, you're up first.
Great, thanks, Ted. If you want to just go to the next slide. So when we talk about freight in downtowns, probably most of the time what we're thinking of is, that Tropicana truck or the USPS truck. But really when we're looking at freight in urban areas, we have to recognize all of the different modes that are actually moving goods. The one that I think is most often forgotten in the design process, and I'll touch back on this in a minute, is that hand cart that's actually moving goods from the truck to its end delivery location. So when we're designing a street or managing a street for freight vehicles, we have to recognize distinctions in the size and weight of vehicles, differences in the configurations of vehicles, the fact that some vehicles might need loading equipment. So that bottom truck, if we're only accounting for the length of that truck and not for that lift gate, when we're designing the street, then we're going to end up with a parking space that's actually undersized for the activity that needs to occur. So recognizing that all of these different vehicles are operating on the street, the next thing we need to think about is how they're actually behaving while they're parked at the curbside. So what's going to determine how long where a vehicle parks and how long a vehicle parks. And there's going to be variability based on the lot size. So is it a quick package delivery where a single package is going in the front door of a single building versus serving multiple receivers, a USPS truck making 20 deliveries on a block versus a single delivery on a block. And then finally, the sensitivity of the goods. So if you're making an extremely high value delivery, you're not going to park the truck 2 blocks away and walk unprotected with that good. Temperature sensitivity can also be an issue, although that can be mitigated often by packaging. Next slide, please. So what actually happens on the street? Something that distinguishes freight transportation from other modes of transportation is that there are actually multiple decision makers that are making choices that result in what ultimately happens on the street. So first, are the business owners or the residents of a neighborhood. Those are the people who determine what needs to be delivered and what time it needs to be delivered. Now, depending on the type of goods we're talking about, if we're talking about an e-commerce parcel, the window they may define maybe, I want it delivered on this day. But just the example that Ted mentioned with a restaurant, if you're a restaurant receiving fresh food deliveries, you need that food to arrive in a very specific time window. And so the determination of when those goods are being delivered is a function of the use that you actually have for those goods and is a decision made by the receiver. then the carrier is the one that's actually delivering those goods. They may have different relationships with the receiver. It may be a fleet that's owned by the same company. It may be a third-party fleet that's managing deliveries for multiple customers. But that carrier is the one that's actually going to make the choice of what kind of vehicle am I going to use to make this delivery, and how am I going to organize my distribution network? Am I going to move my truck between every delivery and have 5 different parking events for very short durations? Am I going to park it somewhere in a centralized area and do micro distribution via handcart or other mode to actually serve that last 50 feet of my customers? And then finally, we have the public sector, which obviously is an important discussion to have today, who are the ones that are establishing the policies that are controlling where freight activity is actually occurring, or at least in theory should be controlling where freight activity is occurring. So establishing the curb, allocating space on the roadway, determining what types of vehicles can actually access that roadway, allocating curb space via curb regulations, maybe implementing things like electric vehicle charging, and then ultimately enforcing those policies. To what extent is enforcement effective? So when there is a misalignment between the demands being established by the receiver and the policies at the curbside, what you end up with are the types of conflicts that you see in the pictures here. Most critically, we have, travel lane obstructions, which result in traffic congestion and sometimes dangerous driving conditions. Bike lane obstructions, which again can be very dangerous when it drives bikes out into traffic. Sidewalk obstructions that can cause challenges for disabled pedestrians in navigating a sidewalk if it's actually obstructing the width of the sidewalk. And so all of these conflicts are major problems that are caused by the freight activity. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the beginning, often forgotten in the design of a street or management of the street is that freight operator themselves once they leave a vehicle. So often now in complete streets implementation. So the bottom picture that we're looking at here, this is on the Upper West Side. Just to the left of that picture is a curbside bike lane. So this is a truck that was serving that neighborhood prior to the implementation of that bike lane. You can see that the truck is actually a side loading truck. So that truck was designed to offload directly onto the curb. The truck has now been moved away from the curb. That's an active travel lane that it's actually double parked in. You can see the loading activity is actually occurring in a second active travel lane. And that vehicle is double parked close to the corner because as that truck offloads, that handcart needs curb access and needs to be able to mount the curb essentially, which it can only do at the corner where there's a curb cut. So when we don't think about the operator safety, we end up with conditions like the two in these pictures where we're actually putting the pedestrian freight operator into very dangerous situations by not recognizing that off-vehicle activity that's going to occur. Next slide, please. So what can we do about making space for freight? In terms of managing the curb, the most basic is just to maintain loading zones where we have dedicated space for freight for commercial activity. However, the way that these are managed can vary from location to location depending on the specifics of demand. And so, for example, some loading zones may need to accommodate both passenger loading, so rideshare drop-offs, and freight. And maybe it's the same loading zone that can accommodate those if most of the freight activity is occurring, before business hours, and later in the day, there's much more rideshare activity and less freight. Often in New York City, we have commercial vehicle zones where the legality of parking there is determined by whether or not you have a commercial plate. However, when you're distinguishing between commercial activities, you can have very different types of parking behaviors. For example, a service vehicle, so a plumber or a cable company, someone with a commercial plate may actually occupy that curb for a very long duration, half a day, if it's permitted. Whereas delivery vehicles tend to turn over faster most of the time. Pricing, duration limits, these are all of the basic methods that can be used for encouraging vehicles to turn over. Responsiveness to those limits, again, is going to be a function, as I'll say on the next slide, of how well they align with the actual demand activity that's occurring at that location. Next slide, please. We can, in the interest of time. So in terms of enforcement of commercial loading is important for two reasons. So first, you want to make sure commercial operators are actually complying with regulations. So if you have time limits or prices, you want to ensure that if they're not actually following, that operators, you establish a culture of compliance for those operators. Enforcement is also important for maintaining operator access. So if you have a commercial loading zone, but it's constantly occupied by a passenger vehicle or by some other activity, then you end up with a useless loading zone, and which leads to basically what would happen if there was no loading zone to begin with. So enforcement, it will be of limited effectiveness without reasonable alternatives. In New York City, the cost of doing business is that you pay your parking tickets. We have the stipulated fine program where trucks essentially aren't even expected to follow parking regulations. So obviously that's not a good way to operate your city. So rules for emerging vehicles may need to be defined. So on that very first slide and in the picture here, you see a freight vehicle. This is a vehicle conducting grocery deliveries. That's right outside my apartment building. In many cities, as these types of vehicles have been introduced, the question becomes, can this vehicle park in a commercial loading zone? It's a commercial vehicle, but often that's not well defined. So as we try to integrate these new modes into the curbside, it's important to carefully establish policies and to define, what is this vehicle and where can this vehicle park? There are emerging technologies for automated enforcement that have been implemented in a number of cities in the US, or there's ongoing pilot tests using a variety of different technologies to, help to maintain that curb access. Next slide, please. So I saw actually, as I was starting the presentation, I saw some comments in the chat box about managing demand. So often when we talk about designing streets for freight, we have an ongoing project right now. And I still had a city respond to a survey to tell us we do not design our streets for freight vehicles. The idea is that freight is not a priority user of the street. And so we have to, accommodate freight around passenger vehicle activity. And the reality is that that's not going to happen. Freight is there because of the demands that are being placed on the street. So there are a number of demand management strategies that can be effective if applied in the right way, but you need to recognize the constraints as well that can influence whether or not these are feasible. So first, access restrictions are an effective means of, limiting certain types of vehicles from operating on a street. But if you move those vehicles off that street, you need to understand, are there sensitive types of deliveries that need to access that street? If it's a pub where you're getting kegs delivered, is it realistic to expect a truck to park 2 blocks away and carry those kegs? If not, then there needs to be a specific accommodation for that type of delivery. Building management is something that we don't talk enough about. There have been some studies done in Seattle looking at office towers, at how much parking time can actually be saved if we had better management within the building. If instead of having the UPS operator have to go up an elevator 4 flights to make a delivery into an office, if he could just drop that package at the ground level, there's a huge amount of savings. So working with businesses and building operators to make that off-street activity as efficient as possible is a huge opportunity. Off-hour deliveries is something that we're doing in New York City. Off-hour deliveries can be extremely effective. They're popular generally with carriers who can tend to travel at times that are less congested, park when costs are lower, have the lower likelihood of getting a parking ticket. However, there are 2 major constraints that can make off-hour deliveries difficult. The first is that the receivers have to either have technology in place or actual staff in place to accept the deliveries during those off hours. If there's no one there to accept the delivery, then, and if there's no way for the operator to drop those goods, then it's not a feasible solution. The second is that in a mixed use area, noise regulations can be a problem during off hours. So if it's a mixed use development where you've got retail on the ground level and residents living above that retail, noise restrictions can be a challenge, or the nuisance of noise. Again, there's technologies for low noise deliveries that can be implemented, but those need to be recognized and integrated. Lockers are a solution for particularly e-commerce to prevent theft of packages, but also repeated failed deliveries of packages. And then finally, micro-distribution. This is another example of micro-distribution. There's interest in shifting things onto cargo bikes and hand carts. If you've got enough density of, operators have enough density that they have customers they can reach within, a 1 or 2 mile radius, it's very feasible. However, you also need to think about where that micro distribution activity is going to occur, because if you don't explicitly allocate space for it, you end up with things like in this picture, where you again are seeing that micro distribution activity occurring in active travel lanes or on parts of the curb where it's not supposed to be happening. So with that, I know we need to move to our next presenter. This is a guidebook that we produced a couple of years ago. I'll put the link to that in the chat box just in case it's of interest to anyone. And I'm looking forward to further discussion with you all.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was great. All right, up next from the city of Jersey City, Mike Manzella. I think without further ado, Mike, you can just go right into your presentation.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Manzella. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning in the City of Jersey City. And I'll speak briefly about Jersey City's comprehensive approach to this ever important balance between people, parking, and deliveries in our downtown areas that hopefully can help initiate some engaging conversation in the session. One of the ways that the city has really focused on that balance and creating place for people is designing places for people that make our retail areas, our downtown areas, attractive places to want to be. I think probably the best example of this in our city thus far is our Newark Ave pedestrian plaza. Newark Ave is at the center of our downtown historic district in partnership with our special improvement district. And as a response to business and resident demand for additional public space downtown being dedicated to people and for more outdoor dining to support these businesses, the city started opening the street to people in 2015 using a very iterative approach with very low cost materials on a temporary basis in a pilot project fashion on the weekends by basically just pulling out planters and blocking cars from coming down the street and putting out tables and benches for people to sit and enjoy the space. We use that iterative approach over time and adapted to business needs and tried to accommodate deliveries and garbage pickup and things like that over time. Eventually, the city embarked on a capital construction project, and in July of 2022, the city cut the ribbon on the 2-block pedestrian plaza that was completely redesigned with pavers, street trees, lighting, and enhanced seating for people to enjoy the space. Additionally, another area of focus for the city in recent years has been the Journal Square downtown area, and specifically a project that was completed last summer, in summer of 2024, was at Bergen Square. Bergen Square is at the intersection of Bergen Avenue and Academy Streets in Jersey City. It is the ancient home to the Lenape and was established by the Dutch as the first permanent European settlement in New Jersey in 1660. Over time, unfortunately, with the advent of automobiles, much of the original sort of colonial public square space was taken over by vehicles and sort of off-street parking lots, and really did not create a sense of place for this, really important sort of retail center in the Journal Square area near our Journal Square Transit Hub. Using the same iterative approach and really working with the community, the city began to sort of pilot out some additional sort of space dedicated to people in this area, and also in the process really work with the community to develop some much needed green space to sort of revitalize this place and make it a place. So the final design was completed last summer, as I said, with basically removing the on-street parking lots that were in front of two of the quadrants in front of retail spaces on this public square, converting Academy Street, which runs sort of north-south, to a one-way, which resulted actually in a net increase of parking for the square. And as you can see in the photos, really created this much-needed sense of place for people to really enjoy the retail space. And we're already seeing in the time since the ribbon was cut in this plaza, new retail spaces opening to support it. One of the other areas that the city moved very quickly on, like many cities throughout our region, was in response to the pandemic in 2020. And the city stood up a parklet program whereby businesses can utilize parking spaces to create additional outdoor dining space. This was done in 2020 as a response to the pandemic at no cost to the businesses, and the city saw over 50 parklets developed by businesses to create that additional space. The program was really well received, and in 2022, the program became a permanent city program. Annual fees were established for the parklet program, and our department developed guidelines and design standards in the outdoor dining program guide in order to really provide a high quality experience for the businesses and the residents of our city. Public transit, as Alison mentioned, is another important demand for our curbside space. In Jersey City, we have a really extensive network of bus routes with bus stops, and balancing that space has been really important with the advent of other types of facilities that we've seen in our city. So we've been able to experiment with various opportunities to still provide access to the curb space while things like protected bike lanes and parking and other types of facilities have come on to the curb. And we've done this through either created concrete floating bus stop islands or even using more lower cost, quicker build type facilities like this bus platform you see on the right in the pictures provided by a company called Zikla. Next slide. The advent of shared micro-mobility has certainly increased the demand for curbside space as well. Jersey City believes it is very important to have options for people to be able to access our downtowns, while having available parking that is well managed is of critical importance to our downtowns. We also recognize that in dense urban environments such as ours, we will never be able to accommodate the traffic and parking needs associated with cars being the only option to access our downtown areas. Not to mention that studies have shown that having these options available really and that provide alternatives to driving and parking downtown are only going to increase the vitality of our downtown districts. So to that end, the city launched a bike share program with City Bike, much similar to the program in New York City in 2015. There are now 53 stations across the city that average 2,200 rides per day, with the most popular destinations being our Grove Street, Exchange Place, and Journal Square downtown areas, as well as our retail malls. We have a further expansion of the City Bike system planned later this year to add another 21 stations in the southern part of our city. Additionally, based on a need that was identified in terms of being able to serve some of our transit deserts in the city, Jersey City launched in 2020 an on-demand micro-transit system provided by our partners at VIA. So the VIA Jersey City micro-transit system provides affordable on-demand transportation for all of our residents. That program also averages 2,100 rides a day. And again, the most popular destinations are our downtown districts and transit hubs. Then, of course, there's things like car share. Is that something that should be happening curbside, and that's something that we are actively evaluating as another opportunity to provide to our residents as another mode of transportation. And many cities across our region have also embraced other shared mobility programs like scooter share. In addition, I think everyone's aware that the delivery modes that we are seeing in our cities is ever evolving at a increasingly rapid pace. Post-pandemic, we, like many other downtowns, have seen a significant increase in commercial delivery with increased e-commerce, and much of that increase we've really seen through people on bikes, on e-bikes and scooters. And we've definitely had to balance sort of the benefits and consequences that come along with those new modes of delivery. Obviously, they're more efficient from a space perspective, but they do present some other challenges. And what else is in the future? Drone delivery. Recently in Jersey City, a pilot program from Uber Eats has launched with small autonomous robots now providing deliveries across our city. What else does the future hold? Next slide. So Jersey City has made it a priority, as I said, to provide that access to our downtowns by other modes, not just vehicles. We have installed over 23 miles of protected bike facilities to support micromobility. Those facilities are completely separated from vehicular traffic to try and avoid some of the issues that Alison spoke about earlier with deliveries sort of blocking bike lanes and things like that. Much of the facilities that we've added throughout the city have been with not as much loss of parking. Much of it has been done through things such as road diets, converting basically 4 lanes to 3 lanes, and using that extra space for protected bike lanes, expansions of sidewalks. We've now started to implement some off-street or sidewalk level bike facilities adjacent to our sidewalks, as well as just right-sizing our traffic lanes to really create enhanced safety as part of our Vision Zero efforts, but also create that space for other modes of transportation to access our downtowns. We also, with any of these projects, have updated curbside regulations when those projects come in with an implementation of additional loading zones. And we also incorporate changes into our site development reviews for new development to make sure that wherever possible, loading can happen internally. Next slide. One of the challenges with increased access for bikes and scooters as well is a safe place to park them. And the city in July of 2023 launched a secure bike parking network citywide in partnership with UNI. This was at no cost to the city and is funded by advertising opportunities within the facilities that they install. We have 6 active locations in the city with a new high capacity pod about to launch next month at Grove Street. There's a planned total of 30 locations throughout the city to really provide that access and make biking and scootering and e-bike use another option, again, to access our downtowns. Just this last month, we also added at 2 locations an e-bike battery swapping program, which allows delivery drivers, residents, and others to be able to have access to a subscription service where e-bike batteries can be charged and swapped at these locations, which also mitigates some risks that we've seen around the country in terms of indoor charging and battery fires. Electrification is another demand for our curbside. As more and more electric vehicles are on the streets, we try and, as much as possible, to provide public charging stations. In an urban context, that continues to be a significant challenge. Many of the facilities that or the locations that we've launched, we have 8 locations across the city, have been off-street because curbside demand is so high, and that certainly is a challenge that we hope to tackle in the coming years. But for the city's part, we've also embraced electrification of our city fleet, including the state's first electric garbage trucks. Some other tools to help with curbside management in practice, our neighbors in Hoboken and in New York City have started to digitize the curb and basically map in real time the activities that are happening at the curb, the regulations that are in place, to be able to analyze what that demand is and adjust curbside regulations accordingly, with things like smart loading zones, where commercial delivery providers can pay the market price for what that curbside space is, and really try to help balance that need for delivery at the curbside. Tools like Populous are one such example that our neighbors in Hoboken are using to do this effort. Jersey City, we also have, through our Safe Streets for All planning grant program, an opportunity to conduct this sort of analysis and curbside management that will be starting soon. And then we also recognize that enforcement is a challenge, and continuous enforcement of curbside regulations is a super important piece of the puzzle. We are exploring some tools and solutions that our neighbors in Hoboken and Fort Lee have started using, such as automated enforcement through a camera system. One such provider is Automotus. They've launched in cities like Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C., and other cities, that basically provide that continuous enforcement for safety issues, as well as provide the opportunity to conduct some smart loading zone regulations and programs in order to provide that dedicated space for those deliveries at the curbside. And finally, I just wanted to also highlight the support that the NJTPA has provided in terms of curbside management and regulations in Jersey City. As part of the sub-regional studies program in 2020, the city adopted a parking management plan, which provided recommendations on how to better manage the curbside in terms of parking, both for residents and visitors, but also deliveries. And also in 2022, the city completed a Jersey City on the Move study, which looked at our transit deserts and really tried to balance and provide recommendations as to what sort of investments and priorities should the city have in terms of moving people around our city in the transit deserts to access our downtowns, looking at things like increased bike share, microtransit, car sharing, AV shuttles, and other opportunities. So with that, I'll pass it back to the team.
Great. Michael, appreciate that great presentation. You and Allison made a good team, I think, on this topic. And with almost 60 people here and counting, obviously we're talking about the right thing.